My jealous sister tried to poison me after I announced my pregnancy, but it backfired horribly. Hello, read it? Family is supposed to be a source of love, support, and security. But sometimes, the people who share your blood are the same ones waiting for you to fail. I learned that lesson the hard way. My name is Valerie, I'm 30 years old, and my sister, Bianca, has spent her entire life resenting me. It wasn't always obvious, at least not at first. When we were little, I thought we were just like any other siblings, arguing over toys, fighting over attention, trying to outdo each other in small, childish ways. She was 2 years older than me, and for as long as I can remember, she carried an air of superiority, as if simply being born first meant she was destined for something greater. Whenever I achieved anything, she made sure to remind me she had already done it first. When I got an A on a test, she boasted about her past perfect scores. If I got a new dress, she suddenly needed a more expensive one. My childhood was filled with moments of feeling like I had to compete, even when I wasn't interested in playing the game. As we got older, it only got worse. Bianca had a way of making everything about her, and when she wasn't the center of attention, she made sure to take it from me. In high school, she spread rumors about me to my friends, always making sure she was the one they trusted more. She flirted with boys I liked, not because she wanted them, but because she wanted to prove she could take them. I remember the first time she truly broke my heart, when she started dating a boy I had confided in her about, knowing I had feelings for him. She had laughed when I confronted her, telling me that if I had really wanted him, I should have acted faster. Our parents always excused her behavior. They said she struggled with insecurity, that she just wanted to feel special. I spent years accepting that excuse, convincing myself that one day she would grow out of it. But she never did. When she graduated, she left home in a whirlwind, convinced she was destined for something better than the small town we grew up in. She got married at 25 to a man named Damien, a corporate lawyer with an impressive salary and the kind of arrogance that matched hers perfectly. They flaunted their lifestyle every chance they got: expensive vacations, designer clothes, luxury apartments. Bianca made sure everyone knew she had married into wealth. She treated it like a victory, like she had won some imaginary race. I let her have it. I wasn't interested in competing. Then I met Marcus. Marcus was different from anyone I had ever known. He wasn't just successful, he was kind. He had a quiet confidence, the kind that didn't need to be flaunted, and a way of making me feel like I was the only person in the world when he looked at me. He came from a good family, had built his own business from the ground up, and never made me feel like I had to prove myself. We met through mutual friends at a charity event, where he had donated a significant amount of money, but didn't want his name attached to it. That was the first thing that struck me about him. His generosity wasn't for show. Our relationship was effortless. He treated me with the kind of love and respect I had only seen in movies, the kind that made me realize why every past relationship had never worked. We traveled together, built a life together, and within 2 years he proposed. It was simple, intimate, and perfect. Just the two of us on a secluded beach, watching the sun set over the water. There was no elaborate display, no audience, just raw, genuine love. When we announced our engagement, Bianca barely reacted. She forced a smile, said the right things, but there was something else in her eyes, something cold, something calculating. I had spent so long trying to believe she was just distant, that she didn't care about my life, but I was wrong. She cared, just not in the way a sister should. She cared about being ahead. She started making subtle comments, planting doubts, questioning if I was sure Marcus was really the one, suggesting that wealthy men always had a wandering eye. I ignored it. I had spent my entire life dealing with her pettiness, and I wasn't going to let her ruin the happiest time of my life. Marcus saw right through her. He told me not to let her negativity affect me, that people like her thrived on making others feel small. When we got married, I didn't ask Bianca to be my maid of honor. I couldn't trust her. She came to the wedding anyway, sulking in the background, barely clapping when we exchanged vows. After that, I started pulling away completely. I didn't need her approval. I didn't need her validation. I had built something real, something beautiful, and I wasn't going to let her taint it. For the first time, I was happy. Marcus and I built a life together, filled with love, laughter, and mutual respect. We moved into a beautiful home, one we had picked together, not because it was flashy or expensive, but because it felt like us. We spent weekends cooking, hosting small gatherings with close friends, making new memories that had nothing to do with competition or proving anything to anyone. I had finally escaped Bianca's toxic shadow. Or at least I thought I had. 6 months ago, everything changed. I found out I was pregnant. It was the best moment of my life. Marcus and I had been trying for months, and when that little test turned positive, it felt like the world had given us exactly what we had been hoping for. We kept it to ourselves at first, wanting to savor the secret for just a little while longer, but we knew we wanted to announce it at his birthday party, a grand event at our home, filled with family and close friends. It was going to be a night of joy, of celebration. But Bianca had other plans. When she arrived at the party, something about her was different. Her usual arrogance was still there, but it was laced with something else. A tension, a forced politeness, like she was playing a role she didn't quite believe in. When Marcus and I made our announcement, the room erupted into cheers, except for her. She clapped, but it was slow, mechanical, and when I met her gaze, I saw something chilling. This wasn't just jealousy. This was hatred. I should have known she wasn't going to let me have this moment. I should have known she wouldn't be able to stand it. But I never expected what happened next. I never expected her to take it this far. Because less than an hour after the announcement, I started to feel sick. And by the time I realized what was happening, it was already too late. The night of the party was supposed to be perfect. Marcus's birthday had always been a grand affair. Not because he wanted it that way, but because he was the kind of person everyone gravitated toward. People loved him, his warmth, his generosity, the way he made everyone feel important. Hosting the event at our home had become tradition, and this year, it felt even more special. We had spent weeks planning, ensuring that everything was flawless. But there was one thing we hadn't planned for: Bianca. The party started beautifully. Laughter and conversation filled the house, the scent of catered dishes wafting through the air, music humming softly in the background. Marcus was in his element, moving effortlessly between guests, making sure everyone felt welcome. I was by his side, glowing with happiness, knowing that in just a few moments, we were about to share the best news of our lives. When the time finally came to announce my pregnancy, I felt my heart race, not with nerves but with sheer joy. Standing next to Marcus, surrounded by friends and family, I took a deep breath before telling everyone that in a few months, our family would be growing. The reaction was instant. Cheers, applause, a wave of excitement as people rushed forward to hug us, to offer congratulations. But not Bianca. She clapped, but it was slow, robotic. Her smile was frozen, her eyes unreadable. For a split second, something passed across her face, something dark, something ugly. And then it was gone, replaced by a carefully crafted expression of happiness. She stepped forward, wrapping her arms around me in what should have been a sisterly embrace, but something about it felt wrong. Her hands gripped my shoulders just a little too tightly, her breath warm against my ear as she whispered a quiet congratulations that didn't sound genuine. I should have known then. I should have recognized the warning signs. But I was too happy, too caught up in the moment to question it. The party continued, drinks flowing, conversations blending together in a blur of celebration. I was careful, of course. I had made it clear that I wouldn't be drinking, and everyone respected that. Or at least I thought they did. It happened so subtly, so naturally that I didn't even notice. A tray of champagne flutes was passed around, their golden liquid shimmering under the chandelier lights. I declined, but before I could set my empty glass down, Bianca appeared beside me, a fresh drink in her hand. She smiled, holding it out to me, insisting that I should have at least one sip to toast to my future. I hesitated. It was a non-alcoholic cocktail, she said, specially made for me. Something fruity, refreshing, light. There was no reason to doubt her. Why would I? She was my sister. Despite everything, despite the years of resentment, the small betrayals, the pettiness, I never would have believed she was capable of something worse. So I took the glass, and I drank. It started as a slow, creeping sensation, an uncomfortable warmth spreading through my stomach, a slight dizziness that I initially brushed off as exhaustion from the excitement. But then it got worse. The room tilted, sounds became distant, muffled, like I was hearing them through water. My heartbeat pounded against my ribs, my fingers trembled, my vision blurred at the edges. I tried to steady myself, gripping the back of a chair, but my legs felt weak, unsteady. Something was wrong. Marcus noticed immediately. He was by my side in an instant, his arm around my waist, his voice sharp with concern as he asked if I was okay. I tried to answer, but the words wouldn't come out right. My tongue felt heavy, my throat dry. A cold sweat broke out along my skin. My stomach twisted violently, nausea clawing its way up my chest. Bianca was watching. She was standing just a few feet away, her expression carefully neutral, her drink untouched in her hand. Our eyes met, and for the first time in my life, I saw it clearly. She wasn't just jealous. She hated me. She had done this. Panic set in. My body wasn't just reacting to nerves. This was something else. Something foreign. Something inside me, attacking me from within. I needed help. I needed to get out of there. Marcus was already moving, calling for someone to grab the car, his voice growing more urgent as he realized how serious this was. Then I collapsed. The last thing I heard before the world went dark was the sound of Bianca's glass shattering against the floor. When I woke up, everything was too bright. The sterile smell of antiseptic filled my nose, the distant beeping of monitors steady but unfamiliar. My body felt weak, drained, like all the energy had been sucked from me. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then I saw Marcus. He was sitting beside the bed, his face pale, his hands gripping mine like he was afraid to let go. There was something in his expression, something I had never seen before. Anger. Not the kind that flared up in a moment of frustration, but something deeper, colder, controlled. And then it hit me. The party. The drink. The sickness. Bianca. The memories flooded back all at once. The panic. The realization. The way she had watched me struggle. I tried to sit up, but Marcus gently stopped me, his grip firm but careful. He told me everything. I had been poisoned. Not enough to kill me, but enough to do serious harm. Enough to have sent me into shock. Enough to have put the baby in danger. The doctors had stabilized me, run tests, made sure I was out of immediate danger. But the truth was undeniable. Someone had tampered with my drink. Marcus knew. Everyone knew. The moment I collapsed, chaos had erupted. The guests had panicked, some trying to help, others frozen in shock. But one person had reacted differently. Bianca. She had backed away, slipping through the crowd, trying to leave before anyone could question her. She hadn't expected me to pass out so fast. She hadn't expected Marcus to act so quickly. She hadn't expected people to see. But they did. One of Marcus's business associates had noticed Bianca hovering too close, had seen her hand me the drink, had watched the way her expression shifted when I started to feel sick. Someone else had overheard her earlier in the night, muttering something about how I always had to be the center of attention. The pieces had come together too fast for her to cover her tracks. By the time Marcus had gotten me to the hospital, someone had already called the police. And now, Bianca wasn't just a jealous sister anymore. She was a suspect. The hours after waking up in the hospital felt like a dream. A slow, disorienting blur where reality kept crashing into me in waves. The sickness, the collapse, the way my body had betrayed me, the realization that Bianca had done this. It was too much to process at once. My body was weak, drained from the ordeal, but my mind was running in frantic loops, replaying every detail of the night, every interaction, every sign I had ignored. Marcus never left my side. He had barely spoken since I woke up, but his silence was thick with emotion, his grip on my hand tense and unrelenting. When he finally did speak, his voice was controlled, measured, but I could feel the rage simmering beneath it. He told me everything that had happened after I collapsed, how the party had erupted into chaos, how people had rushed to help, how Bianca had disappeared the moment things started to go wrong. He told me that multiple guests had noticed her suspicious behavior, that several of them had already spoken to the police. She had been seen lingering too close, seen watching me drink, seen reacting with something far worse than concern when I started to lose control of my body. She had fled. Marcus had barely finished explaining when the doctor came in, his expression serious. He had more test results, more confirmations of what we already knew, but didn't want to accept. My drink had been tampered with a dangerous but non-lethal substance, something meant to weaken, to incapacitate. It wasn't enough to kill me outright, but it had been enough to send my body into shock. And it had put my baby at serious risk. That was what finally broke me. The thought that Bianca had known I was pregnant, had seen how happy we were, and had still chosen to do this. That she had looked me in the eye after hearing the biggest news of my life, and decided to poison me anyway. This wasn't just about jealousy. This wasn't about a rivalry that had gone too far. This was hatred. And now, she was facing the consequences. Marcus stepped out to speak with the police when they arrived at the hospital. I could hear his voice from the hallway, low and controlled, as he recounted everything he knew. Officers had already gone to my house, already taken statements from the guests. People were coming forward, eager to share what they had seen, what they had overheard, how Bianca had spent the night sulking in the background, how she had made snide remarks about how I always got what I wanted, how she had been the one to hand me the drink that sent me to the emergency room. The case against her was building faster than she could run from it. It wasn't long before they found her. She hadn't gone home. She hadn't even contacted my parents. She had checked into a hotel on the other side of the city, trying to lay low, trying to figure out what her next move would be. But there was no next move. Not this time. The moment officers showed up at her hotel room, she knew it was over. They arrested her on the spot. I wasn't there when they took her in, but Marcus was. He had insisted on going, standing just outside the hotel lobby as they escorted her out in handcuffs. He told me later that she had looked disheveled, panicked, her usual confidence shattered. She had tried to argue, tried to act as if this was all some mistake, that she had nothing to do with what happened. But no one was listening. The evidence was overwhelming. The toxicology report, the witness statements, the fact that she had run the moment things went wrong. She had dug her own grave, and now she had to lie in it. News spread fast. My parents were devastated. My mother called me in tears, begging for an explanation, asking me if it was true, asking me what had happened to her daughter to make her do something like this. I had no answers for her. I had spent my whole life making excuses for Bianca, believing that she would change, that she would grow out of her resentment. But I was done pretending. She had tried to poison me. She had risked my child's life. There was no coming back from that. But Bianca's downfall wasn't just legal. It was personal. Because as soon as the news broke, her husband found out. Damien had always been blind when it came to Bianca. He had spent years indulging her, funding her expensive lifestyle, playing into her superiority complex. He had ignored her cruel streak, brushed off her manipulations, convinced himself that she was just a strong-willed woman who liked getting her way. But this was something he couldn't ignore. He didn't even wait for her trial. He filed for divorce immediately. There were no negotiations, no drawn-out fights over assets. He cut her off financially, locked her out of their shared accounts, and made it clear that she was on her own. Bianca had spent years building her identity around being the wealthy wife, the woman with the perfect marriage, the perfect image. And now, in the span of days, she had lost everything. She was in jail, facing criminal charges. She was about to go through a messy, public divorce. She had no money, no husband, no reputation left to protect. And she had done it all to herself. When I was finally discharged from the hospital, I stood outside for a long moment, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the weight of everything settle in my chest. Marcus was beside me, his arm wrapped around my shoulders, his touch grounding me. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that party a week ago. I had gone in believing that my sister could still be saved, that some part of her still cared about me, that there was a line she would never cross. I had been wrong, and now she was paying the price for it. But I wasn't thinking about her anymore. I was thinking about my baby. I was thinking about the life I was going to build, free from Bianca's poison, free from the constant weight of her jealousy. I was thinking about the future, about the love surrounding me, about the family Marcus and I were creating. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking over my shoulder. Because Bianca was finally gone. The days following Bianca's arrest felt surreal. It was as if my life had split into two parallel realities. One where I was still recovering, where Marcus and I were trying to focus on the baby, where I was supposed to be enjoying the happiest time of my life. And then there was the other reality, the one filled with legal proceedings, police reports, and endless questions from detectives and prosecutors. No matter how much I wanted to move on, to put this nightmare behind me, I couldn't escape the fact that my own sister had nearly destroyed me. Bianca's trial wasn't immediate. The legal process took time, and during those weeks, my emotions wavered between anger, sadness, and a strange sense of emptiness. Part of me still couldn't believe it had come to this. No matter how cruel she had been, no matter how much resentment she harbored, I had never imagined she would go this far. The thought that she had been willing to harm me, to harm my unborn child, was something I could never fully process. But the evidence against her was overwhelming. The toxicology report had confirmed the presence of a dangerous but non-lethal substance in my drink. It was something not commonly found in household items, something that required intent. Witnesses had come forward, recounting the way Bianca had hovered around me all night, how she had personally handed me the drink, how she had watched me closely as I grew sicker. And the most damning piece of evidence? The security footage. Marcus had insisted on installing high-quality security cameras all around our house months earlier. It had been for general safety, never something I had thought much about. But now, it had become the final nail in Bianca's coffin. The footage showed her lingering near the bar, watching as the server prepared drinks. It showed her reaching into her purse, discreetly opening a small vial, and emptying its contents into a single glass. Then it showed her walking directly toward me, that practiced smile on her face, handing me the drink while making sure no one else took it instead. There was no denying it now. Bianca had poisoned me, and she had done it with full intention. Her trial began 2 months later, and by then, everything had fallen apart for her. Damien had wasted no time in filing for divorce. Not only had he cut her off financially, but he had made sure that she would walk away with nothing. They had a prenup, one that had been heavily weighted in his favor, and because of her pending criminal charges, she had no leverage. She tried to fight it at first, throwing out accusations, playing the victim, but the truth had already been exposed. No one believed her anymore. Her once glamorous life was reduced to court appearances, a drained bank account, and a rapidly deteriorating public image. She was no longer the perfect wife, the woman who had it all. She was a criminal, and the world was watching her fall apart. I sat in the courtroom the day the trial started, feeling a strange mix of emotions as I watched my sister, now a shell of the person she had once pretended to be. She looked different. The confidence, the smugness, the arrogance, it was gone. She wasn't wearing designer clothes anymore, wasn't flashing expensive jewelry, or carrying herself like she was superior to everyone around her. Instead, she looked small, like she finally realized she wasn't untouchable. The prosecution laid out the case with brutal efficiency. The security footage was played, the toxicology reports were reviewed, witness testimonies were presented. Every piece of evidence stacked higher and higher against her until there was nothing left for her to cling to. The jury barely needed convincing. Then, it was time for Bianca to speak. Her lawyer had advised her not to, but she insisted. And for the first time in my life, I saw her try to look vulnerable. She sobbed, claiming she had never meant to actually hurt me, that it had been a mistake, that she had only wanted to scare me. She tried to paint herself as the tragic sister, the one who had always lived in my shadow, the one who had never felt good enough, the one who had just made a terrible decision in a moment of weakness. But no one bought it. Not the jury. Not the judge. Not even my parents. They had been devastated when the truth first came out, struggling to comprehend that their eldest daughter had done something so monstrous. My mother had cried, asking me if there was any way to fix this, if I could find it in my heart to forgive Bianca, but I couldn't. This wasn't something that could be undone with an apology. She had tried to ruin me. She had almost killed my child. There was no coming back from that. The trial lasted only a few days, but the verdict was inevitable. Guilty. The judge didn't show her mercy. She was sentenced to 4 years in prison for attempted poisoning and reckless endangerment, with the possibility of parole after 2. But even that wasn't the end of her downfall. She had nothing left. Damien had finalized the divorce. Her so-called friends had abandoned her. The reputation she had spent years crafting had crumbled into dust. And now, she wasn't just a bitter, jealous sister. She was an inmate. I didn't go to see her before they took her away. I had nothing left to say to her. She had made her choice. And now, she had to live with it. Walking out of that courtroom, I felt something shift inside me. The weight of years of rivalry, of resentment, of being forced into an unwanted competition, it was gone. Bianca had always tried to make me feel like I was living in her shadow, like I was less than her. But now, I realized the truth. I had never been in her shadow. She had just spent her entire life trying to destroy my light. Marcus was waiting for me outside, his hand warm in mine, his presence a steady reminder of the life I had built without Bianca. I wasn't thinking about her anymore. I was thinking about the future, about my baby, about the love that surrounded me, about the happiness that I had fought for and won. For the first time in my life, Bianca was finally gone, and I had never felt more free. The day Bianca was sentenced was the last time I thought about her with any real emotion. Sitting in that courtroom, hearing the judge hand down her fate, watching her face go pale as reality sank in, it should have made me feel triumphant. I should have felt some sense of victory, knowing that after everything she had done, after all the years of jealousy, manipulation, and hatred, she was finally facing consequences. But I didn't feel victorious. I just felt done. There was no relief, no satisfaction in watching her be taken away in handcuffs. Just an overwhelming sense of finality. Bianca had spent her whole life trying to make me feel small, trying to take away what was mine, trying to prove that she was somehow better than me. And now, she had nothing. No power, no money, no reputation. Just a prison sentence and the realization that she had lost everything. Not because of me, but because of herself. When Marcus and I left the courthouse, the sun was setting, casting the sky in soft oranges and deep purples. For the first time in weeks, I took a deep breath and felt lighter. It was over. Really, truly over. Bianca was gone. And for the first time in my life, I didn't have to look over my shoulder, waiting for her next cruel act, her next sabotage, her next attempt to ruin me. I was free. The weeks that followed felt like a reset. Marcus and I focused on ourselves, on preparing for the baby, on reclaiming the happiness that had been overshadowed by the nightmare Bianca had caused. My pregnancy had been put through more stress than I ever could have imagined, but miraculously, my baby was still healthy. I had been terrified after the poisoning, afraid that the damage had been irreversible, that I had lost something precious before I had even had the chance to hold it. But every doctor's visit, every ultrasound, every steady heartbeat reminded me that my child was still fighting, just like I had been. My parents struggled with the aftermath of Bianca's actions. My mother called often, her voice laced with guilt, asking how I was, asking if I could ever find it in my heart to forgive my sister. She wasn't asking for Bianca's sake. She was asking for hers. She was trying to understand how things had gone so wrong, how the daughter she had raised could have done something so monstrous. But I had no answers for her. Bianca had been making her own choices for years. I had spent my whole life giving her second chances, hoping she would change, excusing her behavior as insecurity or immaturity. But there was no excuse for what she had done. No way to justify the fact that she had known I was pregnant, had seen how happy Marcus and I were, and had still decided to poison me. That wasn't insecurity. That wasn't sibling rivalry. That was hatred, and I would never forgive her for it. I told my mother the truth. I was moving on. Bianca wasn't a part of my life anymore. She never would be again. She didn't argue. She just sighed, defeated, and said she understood. But even if she did, I knew she wasn't ready to let go of Bianca completely. She still visited her in prison. She still held on to hope that one day, somehow, Bianca would change. That she would come out of this a different person. Maybe that hope was what she needed to cope with the shame of having raised someone capable of what Bianca had done. But I wasn't holding on to that hope anymore. I had finally learned to stop expecting Bianca to be someone she never was. Months passed, and my belly grew. Bianca stopped being the first thing on my mind when I woke up in the morning. She stopped being the shadow looming over me. My life became about the future, about my baby, about Marcus and the family we were creating together. The day I went into labor was the most terrifying and beautiful moment of my life. Hours of pain, of exhaustion, of pushing through every fear and every doubt, and then, finally, my daughter was in my arms. Tiny, perfect, real. I cried when I held her. Not because of everything that had happened, not because of the past, but because this was what mattered. Not Bianca, not her jealousy, not the nightmare she had put me through. This, my daughter, my husband, the life we were building together. Bianca had spent her entire life trying to destroy me, but she had failed. She had tried to take this happiness away from me, but instead, I had come out of it stronger. And she was sitting in a prison cell, completely alone, while I was surrounded by love. That was justice enough for me. I never saw Bianca again. She was released early on parole after 2 years, but by then, she had nothing left. No husband, no money, no status. She tried reaching out once. A letter, handwritten, long and rambling. She didn't apologize. Not really. She tried to explain herself, to justify what she had done, to act like she had just made a terrible mistake, like she had never really meant to hurt me. She wrote about how prison had changed her, how she was different now, how she wanted to rebuild her life. I never wrote back. I didn't care who she had become. She wasn't part of my story anymore. Life moved on. My daughter grew, filling our home with laughter, with joy, with everything Bianca had tried to take from me. Marcus and I thrived, stronger than ever, untouchable by the past. One day, years later, I found myself walking past a mirror, catching a glimpse of my reflection. I didn't look over my shoulder. I didn't feel the weight of Bianca's presence in my life anymore. She was gone, and for the first time in my life, I was exactly where I was meant to be.